John Hayward is here. He's the National Security Deputy Editor at Breitbart. John, wonderful to talk to you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thanks for your reporting about Afghanistan. Let's take us outside of the airport. What horrific reports are you hearing and seeing about that?
Well, there's not as much news coming in from outside Kabul as used to be the case as the Taliban clamps down. But during their march on Kabul, there were stories of women being raped, young children being taken away and seized as jihad brides, brutality towards anyone who dared to resist the Taliban, which not many people did. They got a lot of those big conquests without a fight. They just walked into cities with prearranged surrender agreements that the Biden administration was somehow completely unaware of and just blew through a string of cities until they were suddenly at the gates of Kabul, 90 days ahead of the Biden administration scheduled. So during that lightning conquest, a lot of communication with the hinterlands has been shut down, and we don't know what they're doing in some of the cities they've occupied.
That's pretty wild because when we say there's 10,000 Americans, and I'm curious who these people are even, what they're doing there and what their roles are. I can't even picture who these 10,000 people are, but they're not all in Kabul. They're all over the country, and now there's no chance. Like how we're just saying, hey, go to the Karzai airport, but that's in Kabul. If you live 100 miles outside or wherever, you're never going to get there.
Well, and the State Department has sent messages at varying points to the Americans in Afghanistan, telling them, get to the airport, but we can't guarantee your safety. And then telling them, don't go to the airport until we contact you and tell you to come, because we can't guarantee your safety. So the people trapped there have heard it both ways. And I would imagine they're very confused and frightened right now. There have been reports of the Taliban abusing Americans physically as they try to get to the airports. President Biden denied that, but then his staff in the Pentagon admitted it was true after President Biden denied it. So the Americans in this crowd are not safe. And the crowd around the airport has been prone to stampeding. There have been incidents of people being crushed and pushed around. Gunshots have been fired. There was a gun battle that American and German troops got involved in between apparently Taliban forces and the Afghan security personnel that were providing security there. So it's an incredibly dangerous situation around the airport. And yet that's where people have to go if they're going to get out of Afghanistan.
Let's give an opportunity to be fair here. Let's slow it down for a second. Are the president's critics being unfair by putting this all on him and his decisions? And maybe they really thought that Kabul would be able to stand for longer, the Afghan military, and they really did. They betrayed the president and made the president look bad. Or does he deserve this criticism?
Well, I think the Biden administration did really think Kabul was going to hold out a lot longer. They thought they were going to have time to do a much more orderly evacuation. There's a lot that they didn't plan for, like the incredible seizure of American weapons and equipment the Taliban has carried out. Now, by now, you've probably seen pictures of Taliban soldiers marching with American weapons and gear, Taliban dressed in American military uniforms reenacting Iwo Jima, but raising their flag in a propaganda photo. I mean, they robbed us blind. And you have to think that the people in the Biden administration either didn't think about that or they didn't see it coming. They thought they would have more time to pull everything out, pull the equipment out, neutralize what they couldn't take. They were saying a month ago in the Biden administration that they thought they had 60 days, 90 days, a year before the Taliban could possibly reach the gates of Kabul. So I think they really were taken by surprise, but that's Joe Biden's fault. There was more and more leaking coming from his security apparatus, that the military told him this was going to happen, that the Afghan military wasn't capable of fighting back, that a lot of the reports that we've heard for years about a rapidly developing, capable, well-equipped military force in Afghanistan were complete fabrications, and they actually had nothing that could withstand the Taliban once we withdrew. It wasn't that long ago that President Biden said he saw a 300,000 strong force of Afghan soldiers with top shelf equipment and American training standing between the Taliban and Kabul. That was never true. There were never 300,000 of them. And as we saw, they didn't fight. A lot of them did. And, we're not hearing their stories because they lost their battles, but a lot of them didn't. And in the end, the Taliban made it right to Kabul with very little resistance across most of the country.
Have you heard anyone question, why were there so many Taliban members still around? I've been there for 20 years. I thought we were killing the Taliban. How was there ever, after 20 years, enough of these guys to even take over anything?
Yeah, how did they get all this strength? How did they manage to marshal these forces? The short answer is Pakistan. A lot of the Taliban were able to hide out in Pakistan, moving their forces into the Pakistani tribal areas where we couldn't get at them with anything. And there they reconstituted their strength. They recruited heavily from Pakistan, from the Pakistani border area in Islamic schools all across that area. Taliban were scooping in fighters. The Pakistani government knows it. They didn't stop it. They are starting to be a little nervous about how many of their people went over to the Taliban and served them as fighters, but they had the manpower they needed. They were roughly equal in overall strength to the Afghanistan Defense Force at the moment the lightning Taliban blitzkrieg across the country began. And unfortunately, the Afghan Defense Forces, in many cases, ran away or surrendered or had made prearranged surrender agreements. So their strength on paper was nothing compared to the Taliban's resolve. This was all a question of resolve. The Taliban never gave up. They never thought they were gone for good. They planned from day one to reconstitute, rebuild their strength, and come back. And they were waiting for the day that it was time to make that move, and that day has come.
Wow. That was deep and insightful. I want more of that. Like, subscribe, get more.